Wow.
since I started writing it and putting it all together, and it took a long time to get it off the ground. I mean, it's a short, so you don't think of that. Like, I mean, there's been shorts that I've thought of and then shot the next day, so it's weird that this one's taken that long, but it's just, yeah, it's wild to have been on a bit of a journey with it, but it's exciting now, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the story without giving too much away?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to, shorts are shorts, so it's like, spoiler alerts only kind of last for about 10 minutes anyway, but it's about a couple that lived in a particular house back in the 50s, and then what happened to them on Halloween night in 1955, and how it's kind of affected that house since then. Yeah.
Excellent. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you're a filmmaker besides this. Can you tell us about some other works that you've done?
I've worked in the industry now for about 10 years. So almost as long as I've been working on this one movie. But I've worked as a DP on a couple different things, on a couple different projects. I've been a production manager on things. I've produced a couple shorts, and I've done a bunch of smaller projects as writer and director. So yeah. So it's doing stuff like the Nickel Horror Challenge every year was a big thing for me to just kind of keep at it while I was working on other people's stuff.
Right.
So,
is that something that's still going on now? The Nickel Horror Challenge?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
There was something that was started. I was actually on the board of the Nickel back when that one got started in, I think, maybe 2013 or 2012, something around there. And it was just a 48-hour challenge, so people get something to get kind of specific prompts of like a line of dialogue or a prop or a character or something like that, and they have 48 hours to write, shoot, and edit a short horror film. So
you would put out, like, what would be an example of something that you would put out there?
One of the big ones that we did was The Calming. The Calming was actually the one that I made the year that I wrote. So I had that Halloween written before we made The Calming. And The Calming was one that me and Blair Downey did. And we got our prop and line of dialogue, which was a clear plastic bag, and it's not what it looks like as a line. And we wrote the movie Friday night, and we shot it on Saturday and edited it and submitted on Sunday, and then we actually won Best Movie and Scariest Movie that year with that one.
So you were given one line of dialogue and a plastic bag.
Well, we weren't even given the plastic bag. We were just told we had to have a plastic bag in the movie. Yeah.
And that
was it. And then
that was it.
Yeah. And they've done that every year since, and they've changed kind of the order and different things that way. Yeah, it's fun.
That is excellent. Tell us a little about your writing, about your books.
Well, Terra Nova was the first one. It came out last year. And that one was really fun to work with Engine on that. It's something I've always wanted to do, and getting the opportunity to work with a bunch of people on it. It's the book's an anthology, and Terra Nova 2, which is out now. It's an anthology where we have, it's kind of like, I remember a lot of great anthologies when I was younger with really good framing devices, and that was always the thing that I really like. I love the structure of people telling stories in stories, and that's kind of what happened with the book. Matt from Engine and I were talking about what to do and how to kind of put together an anthology, and we kind of came up with this idea of, I had done a couple years ago, I was in Dublin and had done this like ghost bus tour. Okay. And it's just basically kind of like the Haunted Hike here, but it's on a bus and it drives you all over Dublin. And so that's what we decided would be the framing device. And so each stop along the way, it's a bus that takes people all over Newfoundland, and each stop along the way is a different story from a different author, and then I've written the framing device that goes around all that in one of the stories. And so that was super fun. And then Terra Nova 2 is a little bit different than the first one. It doesn't have the bus, but who knows? The bus might come back for a third if we get to that point.
That is excellent. That is excellent. Now the film industry in Newfoundland. Yeah. What would you classify it as? Is it just starting out? Has it been here for a while?
It's been going for years, and it's just growing. Last year and this year, and then is the biggest year in production that we've ever had. Last year was the previous biggest, and it's been going that way for years. And so we're really at a interesting point where we're, really testing our capacity for what the industry can withhold in terms of crew to keep, keep shows going, because there's a lot coming here and a lot of things shooting here, and it's a really exciting time to kind of push it, because it's a great industry for Newfoundland.
It is, yeah.
It really is. It's got good paying jobs for people. It's fun work. It brings in a lot of outside investment, and it also draws people in. When people can go places and take vacations and stuff, you yourself, the same way as me, like, you like to go places sometimes that like are from your favorite shows, or like, like you have that kind of that kind of viewing fandom tourism is a thing, and getting people to come check it out. Like, we saw it happen with Doyle. How many people, when Republic of Doyle was up, how many people would come to Newfoundland to check out, check the place out, and it's something that happens that way. So it's kind of cool to see how the industry can affect all that stuff, and it's great to see it continue to grow and thrive and just keep growing.
With these short films that people produce and make here locally, where can people see them to? Or where do they go to? Like, once you make your film, where does it go from there?
I mean, it really depends. With that Halloween, it's like, we're going to go festivals on this one, and we're going to try to get out as far and wide as we can with festivals, and then through those, sometimes films are bought and licensed by different streaming platforms or different things like that. But it's really up to the filmmakers, and at the end of the day, once it's kind of exhausted the festival circuit and all that, then it's just up to you to kind of put it online. And some people just kind of skip the festival thing. Like, some people make things just because they want to make them and get them out there, and then it's just put them online themselves. And so,
how would you suggest someone could get into the business if they are interested? What direction would you point them in?
Just NIFCO is a great spot to go for that if you're interested in getting into the business, contacting the people at NIFCO, because letting them know that you're interested and want to be part of it. They have a bunch of film classes. They have a bunch of stuff like that. That's how I got involved in the industry here.
Oh, excellent.
And getting out there and getting on their list, so that when shows are crewing up, and when movies are crewing up, and when short films are crewing up, and they're looking for people, knowing that you have an interest and stuff is there. And I know Rex is doing some outreach and stuff that way, and other projects are. So there's a bunch of ways to do it. It's just a matter of like checking in. If you know anybody who works in the industry, just give them a shout. And usually there's enough on the go that we're trying to get people, as involved as we can.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you for coming in today and having a chat with us.
Yeah.
Mike Hickey, filmmaker and author. We'll be right back after this. Thank you, Mike Hickey. And up next, cartoonist Wallace Ryan. And welcome back. I'm here now with Wallace Ryan from Downtown Comics. And Wallace also is a cartoonist. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
Wallace, give us a little background on Downtown Comics, and then we're going to get into your cartoon work.
Well, Downtown Comics has been in business since 1997, I do believe. It was started by my good friend Jason Conway, and he actually used to be a customer of mine when I had a comic book shop, and we became friends that way. And as a matter of fact, when he opened up the store, I designed his logo for him, and I did his street sign. And I shopped there all the time. And I moved away for a few years, and when I came back, he said to me, geez, do you know anyone who'd want to work a few shifts at the shop?
Sure.
And I said, sure, I'll do it.
Yes,
why not,
why
right?
not?
So I did, I did his Facebook work for him and stuff like that. And unfortunately, Jason passed away last December.
Sorry, yes.
And his daughter Carrie has taken over the place, and she's doing a fabulous job. The customers all really love her and all that, and because it's really a community. That's one thing that we've found working, and myself over the store. A lot of the people who come in, they become friends after a while.
That's right. Yeah. Right? That's what I like about going to comic book stores like Downtown Comics. You go in and it's like almost like going to Cheers on the old TV. Darren, hi! Everybody comes in and is like, how you doing?
You used to come into my comic book store, the Daily Planet.
I remember your
place. That's where we first met.
Yes,
as a matter of fact,
I remember the Daily Planet very well.
And so yeah, it really is, and especially through popular culture, everything from Big Bang Theory, with the comic book store being shown as a destination.
That's right, yep.
Has been great for comics. And the sales of comics in the past few years, especially graphic novels, that has shot through the ceiling. A couple of years ago, our industry had our first $1 billion year, which was great.
Yeah.
And I mean, comics have changed too since I had my store. When I had my store, it was a predominantly male audience.
Yeah.
But now, when I go down to Downtown Comics, I mean, sometimes half the people in the store are women.
Yes, yep.
And that's great for comics, because it's like no art form can really exist on just 50% of the audience. Right?
That's one thing I didn't like about when they used to portray a comic book store on Big Bang Theory. It's like, oh, there's a girl in the store.
Yeah.
That's not reality.
No.
You go into any comic book store like Downtown Comics, there's just as many girls there as there's guys.
Yeah, and now when I had my store back in the 90s, sure, it was like an all-me. The only people who came in there that were girls were like my girlfriend or maybe one of the customers' girlfriend.
Right.
That was about it.
Yeah.
But I call the generation of women who are now into comics, both creating, buying, and all that. They're like daughters of the Sandman, because it's all the people who had mothers who grew up during the early 90s, during the Sandman era, and bought the Sandman comics because it had a huge female readership, and it's great for comics.
It is,
because when I was growing up, there were two women in the comic book business.
Okay.
One for Marvel, one for DC.
Yeah.
Actually, no, two for DC, because ironically enough, the publisher from the late 70s of DC Comics and who made it very successful was Jeanette Kahn.
Okay.
So it's, and like I say, it's been great for comics in general, all right?
Now, I've noticed something that Downtown Comics has been doing lately. Indie comics, are people making their own?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that's going.
We'll sell any comics if people have, nicely done comic or whatever. We'll sell it. There was a friend of mine, Mike Feehan, who's worked for DC. He did his own comic.
Okay.
Paul Tucker, a friend of mine who I did the Nobody Is in Control with.
Yes.
He did a comic. Actually, we did the comic. Come to think of it, it was just called Walk.
Right.
And it was my first credit as an editor, and I lettered it for him.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, we're both artists, and always trying to struggle to work together on a project.
Sure, yes.
I end up doing his lettering for him, and that's about the closest. But it's still a lot of fun. We really enjoy it, right?
Good, good. Now, back to your cartoonist work. Tell us about that.
Well, right now I'm doing lettering for, like I say, for Paul.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm working on my own projects. I mean, I've been doing comics since I was a teenager, and as a matter of fact, myself and my friend Jerry Porter, we'd done a comic called Zeitgeist back in the late 70s.
Okay.
Which is considered Newfoundland's really very first comic book. And then in the 90s, myself and Todd Lidstone, we did a comic called Toxic, and did 2 episodes, and that was sort of more the real first Newfoundland comic.
Yeah.
And these days, I'm actually doing I do a comic for Newfoundland Quarterly.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's usually a 2-page comic on some aspect of Newfoundland history, which is a lot of fun because it's so different from superhero comics, because you're dealing with real life things, got to research the subject.
So it's actual facts.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun because there's no better way in my mind to teach history, especially to kids, than using comics.
That's right. That is so true.
They love it. Yeah. And I teach comics, well, before COVID, I taught comics, and I still will be teaching comics at the Anna Templeton Center on Duckworth Street. And that's been great because I taught Paul in one of my first classes.
Did you?
Many years ago. He was a teenager, as a matter of fact.
He was the Padawan.
As a matter of fact, he was in the first class of comics I ever taught.
Yes, okay.
And Mike was in one of my classes, so and that was one thing I'd always hoped for, was that over the years, just teaching comics that over and over again to all these different classes, that just out of sheer numbers alone, that would start to build a bit of a community.
Yeah.
Now, Paul and I, we started something called the Breakdown Comic Jam, which is kind of like a monthly comic book club, drawing club.
Okay, yeah, that's
and nice. We've been at it 10 years now, and we've sort of really built up a small community of comic book artists too, which like I say, that's always been my dream, because when I was growing up, it was just me and Jerry were
That's right.
the comic book artists in town, right?
Yeah. If anybody wants to learn how to draw.
And we go right from the basics, penciling, inking, even lettering, the whole thing, from one to the other, and then I get them working on some comics of their own.
So right from a blank sheet?
Yeah.
Right to
the pencils,
right to the panels.
then to and constructing it, how to pencil it, how to ink it, how to do the lettering, because there's a way you can. And I teach the more the old-fashioned way too.
Okay.
Because as opposed to in the old days where it was all hand drawn.
Sure.
Nowadays, some people do it all on computer, which is fine for coloring in certain aspects of it. But the drawing, I still teach my students to do the hand drawing, because then at the end you still have the original art left.
That's right.
If you do it on the computer, you can't sell it as original art.
That's right.
And I said, so drawing by, because I'll draw it by hand, and ink and do everything by hand, but I'll still scan it into the computer and fix it, and tool around with a bit on the computer, maybe add in some special effects.
Sure.
But that's about it. Otherwise, it's all hand tooled.
Hand tool, and it's always nice to keep the originals.
As a matter of fact, when we did our comic together, Paul and I, one of the conditions of me doing his lettering is that the credit, as you know in comics, written by, drawn by, instead of just lettered by, it had to read hand lettered by.
Hand lettered by, gotcha. All right, Wallace, so if someone wants to get in contact with Downtown Comics, how do they find them?
We're at 141 Duckworth Street. We have a page, Downtown Comics NL, and it has this send message button, which is great because we can talk to people directly.
Perfect.
If they got any questions, and drop by for a visit, especially if there's a young comic book artist out there looking for a hand on something. I'm always willing to give a bit of advice.
Excellent, thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
Guys, so if you want to check out Downtown Comics or Wallace Ryan's cartoon work, check them out online. We'll be right back after this. If you have comments or guest ideas for Pocket Universe, please email darren.pocketuniverse@gmail.com. Wallace Ryan, thank you for a great interview. Now, this writing thing, everyone seems to be doing it. Let's see what I can do. Long time ago in a galaxy, nope, that's been done. Once upon a time, nope, that's been done. I need professional. Up next, writer Kelley Power. And welcome back. We're here now with Kelley Power, writer of young fiction and lately scary stories. Welcome, Kelley.
Hello, Darren.
Tell us about your work.
Well, I've been fiddling around with my writing for probably about 5 years now. I loved writing as a kid and everything, but I took some time away from work to try and build myself up into a little bit of a writing career, and over the last 2 or 3, that's come along really well. I've been focusing on young adult fiction, like you said.
Okay, yep.
And most recently, now working with Engine Books on some anthologies and my own short story collection of horror shorts for young people.
Oh, excellent. What was your first book or your first story?
My first story published? That's a good question. My first thing ever published was a haiku.
Okay.
Which I can't remember. And I would say after that, it was probably the stories that I had in Chillers from the Rock, which was an Engine publication from probably 3 years ago.
Okay.
And since then, just steadily building up a little parcel of stories here and there. Another one in Terra Nova, which was also published by Engine last year. I have some more mainstream, I guess, kind of stuff, you'd call it. A story in a volume called What's Written in the Ladies that was edited by Bridget Canning 2 or 3 years ago. And that was all inspired by graffiti from women's washrooms all over the world.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so throw that into the mix.
Yeah.
And now I've been focusing on, I do have a young adult novel manuscript that is out with some publishers right now that I'm hoping will get picked up, and this collection that's coming out with Engine called Tomb Stories in September.
So the young fiction, can we talk about that a bit, what that story's about, without giving away too much?
The novel?
Yeah.
The novel is about 3 girls. It's set in 1990s St. John's. Not in any way semi-autobiographical.
No.
Not at all. And it takes place in one day, rapid fire. A lot of interesting things are going on. There's car accidents and first kisses and fights and all that kind of stuff. So that's the novel.
In one day?
In one day.
In one day, okay.
Try to keep the pace up, keep people interested.
Yeah, I think so.
And then with Tomb Stories, that's set in contemporary times, and it's got a framing narrative around the stories of young people going to a graveyard.
Oh, interesting.
To have a virtual reality experience, they stand in front of certain grave markers and hear a story about how that person either died or an event in their life that was horrible or terrifying, and they experience it through VR. And then there's a narrative that kind of takes them through to a conclusion that I hope will be surprising and scary at the end.
Nice. Now, you mentioned that you're working with Engine Books.
I am.
Tell us a little bit about Engine Books and what you're doing with them.
Engine has, Matthew LeDrew and Ellen Curtis will correct me if I'm wrong, but they've been around for over a decade. And to my knowledge are the largest publisher of genre fiction in Atlantic Canada.
Nice.
They can give a business pitch at some point, but from a writer's perspective, I can speak to they just have this enormous love, affinity, and enthusiasm for that community of writers in the province, horror, science fiction, fantasy. They do have some, I'll call more mainstream, I suppose, content that they produce as well, but I'd say that that's what they're known most for, that genre piece. And you know, publishers must be a business.
That's
but
right.
You also, my experience with them is you also feel like you're very well supported just by being a part of that community because they're so passionate about it themselves.
Now, you're also involved with the Writers Alliance, am I correct in saying that?
I am.
Okay.
I was on their board of directors for 4 years in more of a full-time role, and now I'm their past president.
Tell us a little bit about Newfoundland Writers Alliance, if you can.
We've been around for over 30 years. It's an organization that's mandate is to be supportive to writers in all stages of their writing. It's not just top of their game, you know, nationally or internationally known writers. It can be a person who's just writing in their home and never want to publish, but looking for community, looking for contests, looking for programs that they can take part of.
Right.
Trying to meet other writers just so that you know you're not alone out there, because it can be a very lonely endeavor.
Do like a little bit of networking between the writers and that, share ideas and that.
Yeah, they do. We started last year, I believe it was, doing write-ins. That got derailed by COVID a little bit. We tried to take it online, but that's open to anyone. You don't have to be a member to participate in it, and that's what it's trying to do, build that relationship between people. And whether that's just talking craft or talking about your grocery list or, you know, will you be a beta reader for my material, any of that stuff. Any and all things, just trying to bring people together.
It's interesting you said, you mentioned COVID. COVID, I think, touched everybody. How did it impact writers?
It depends on who you ask. I mean, several were negatively impacted. Book launches were canceled or went online, and that's a little bit of a different creature because you tend to sell more books at an in-person book launch.
In-person, yes, that's right.
Yeah. Different event cancellations, delays, but at the same time, more people being home, possibly reading.
That's right,
is a good perk to have.
Yeah.
But we also heard from writers that said based on the amount of content, like if they were a freelance journalist, for example, their income increased during COVID.
Okay.
But you know, a lot of writers are tied to producing dramas, for example.
Right.
And of course, we know venues were closed for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say that on the balance, the impact would be negative. But you know, we persevere, and if we've been able to find the creative juices, it's not a bad time to put a little bit of content in place and get some words on paper.
That's true. So what's in the future now for you? What new projects do you have coming up?
I am hoping to just be able to take a break.
Oh, okay.
for a month or so after these two major projects that I've been juggling are there. But there's always something on the back burner. Writing colleague and I are talking about co-writing a trilogy of sci-fi books together.
Oh, nice.
There's always, I'd love to do, as I finished up the narrative thread through this Tomb Stories book, I actually found myself looking at, I could produce a sequel of this.
That's right.
And there's always more short story ideas for horror coming, so that's there in the back of my mind as well.
Excellent. If someone wanted to check out your work, how would they find you?
They can find me on Facebook under my name, Kelley Power. I'll have a website up and running within the month. They can find me there. Those are the two main avenues where they could find me.
All right. And your books, and Engine Books also?
Not just yet. It will be once we start doing pre-orders and things like that.
Okay. Kelley, perfect. All right. So if you want to check out Kelley's work, Check her out there, and we'll be right back after this. That was an excellent show. I learned about cartoons, about horror movies, and about writing. Thank you, Mike Hickey, filmmaker, Wallace Ryan, cartoonist, and writer Kelley Power. Thank you for watching Pocket Universe, and we'll see you next time, guys.
The following program is brought to you by Rogers Anyplace TV. Enjoy